guys, and welcome to another episode of Pod Leaders. Welcome, welcome. I'm very, very pleased to introduce my next guest, Sinead Finn. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Rachel.
It's a pleasure. I know we've tried to do this a few times, so I feel like this is going to be the best one. So thank you for having patience with us in doing the record. I love your story, so I really want to get it out. Sinead has had a great background within aviation, so we'll jump straight in. And could you tell us how you started within this world, then, Sinead?
Well, really, actually, it started from quite a young age because my mother ran a travel business and I've been going to trade fairs since, well, from a very young age and helping out at trade fairs. So then I went on to university. I intended to actually be a lawyer, but that didn't transpire, and I ended up doing a postgraduate in tourism, actually. And as part of my degree, I did Italian. So that flung me into Ryanair, actually, but not before I lived in Norway, in Oslo, promoting Ireland to the Norwegians, which was a fantastic fun. And then from there, I went to Ryanair to help with negotiating contracts with the Italian airports, but also the whole sales and marketing portfolio for Ryanair in Italy.
Amazing. So the language was really the part of your education piece that pushed you through that way?
Definitely. I mean, I was already in tourism, but it was the language. Yeah, I was very much looking for a job in Italy, actually, in the area of tourism. And I wanted to work for the Irish Tourist Board in their office in Milan. But before I managed to do that, I found myself in Ryanair, having a lot of fun growing an entirely new market, which was just, yeah, it was great fun. It was, especially when when you're younger, just traveling all around Italy and negotiating with airports and helping to promote a brand new brand. I know that's difficult for people to understand today. Actually, back in 1998, Ryanair was very much a new brand, particularly so well known in Ireland and the UK, but not as well known, obviously in the rest of Europe. So it was really good fun. Obviously, being Irish as well, promoting a new Irish airline, in their markets was just such good fun.
Really fun, really fun. Did you find, well, so you are fluent in Italian, of course, but when you are negotiating with the airports, was that quite a challenge bringing a new brand in? Were they very open to having a new airline fly in?
It really varied from airport to airport. Most airports in Italy were very receptive to Ryanair because there are a lot of military airports, secondary airports in Italy that were back then completely underutilized. So if you look like at an airport, like Bergamo, which is, quite near to Milan, and you think how much that airport has grown, how much the local community has benefited from Ryanair's growth there. So, the majority of the airports are very open. There were an odd few that actually couldn't get their head around, maybe our negotiation, how we negotiated. In other words, the objective was always to get the best deal you possibly could so that you could pass on that cost saving to the customer in the form of cheaper airfares, because that's Ryanair was about. It was about traveling, everybody being able to travel. So it was groundbreaking at the time. Again, difficult to maybe comprehend now because we can all travel wherever we want, whenever we want, cheaply. So, but back then it was a big thing.
It was totally new. Brilliant. So you spent quite a stint with Ryanair, actually, in a number of different business areas. Could you run through how that went?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, the first 4 years I was in the Italian market, and then the next 6 I headed up sales and marketing for Europe. So essentially, that was very similar to the Italian job, but just covering Europe. So I had an incredible team of people who did what I used to do in Italy. They were fantastic, and most of the ad ideas that people would have seen at the time came actually from that team. They were just really creative, really fun bunch, very, very clever. And yeah, so that was a really good time for those 6 years. And then the recession hit around 2007, 2008, and then things changed because ancillaries up until that point, the customer was very reactive to ancillaries. But then around the recession time, things started to change, and customers were a lot more reticent, I would say, to book ancillaries. So we had to, and then there was a lot more competition. So if you take something like travel insurance, you had a business like Insure and Go coming into the market selling online travel insurance directly. And we were selling it within the booking flow, but that was impacting us because they were selling annual policies. So with those changes, I then moved into the ancillary revenue area, so covering commercial revenue, and I did that for the 3 years. Then my 3 remaining years out of the 13, I did that, and that was a super job as well. Every job I had there was just absolutely amazing. But I suppose the initial 10 years would have been very much, you're very focused on the internal business. So, the business of flights, the business of, the pricing of the flights, the actual, how you sell those flights to the customer, looking at the website, all of these very internal areas. Whereas the ancillary revenue role was looking very outward at partnerships. So it gave me this incredible platform for, dealing with Hertz, Booking.com, travel insurance providers, and all sorts of ideas. So it was a little bit like being on the Dragon's Den, because people would come to you with their ideas and then you'd see if they would fit the Ryanair customer and the product. So it was, it was a lot of fun.
Lots of fun, very varied. It sounds like you had a bit of a look at all different pieces of the business. I love, we've had a conversation previously about the creativity of some of the marketers that you're working with previously. And that really made a name for Ryanair and the brand itself in a number of different ways. That must have been really fun to be around.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's one fantastic girl who comes straight to mind when you mention this, because her name was Giovanna Gentile, and she came up with an ad for the Italian market, which was, it was a particular week when we were, running an ad campaign trying to get people to travel to a certain part of Italy. And she just in the ad said, book flights to come to the Carla Bruni and Sarkozy wedding that's on this weekend. And the wedding was completely, nobody knew, it was completely confidential, but it was just a fluke. She didn't have any insider information into when Carla and Bruni and Sarkozy were getting married, but she just hit on something. And of course, we had Sarkozy's office contact us because he, quite rightly, wasn't very happy. But it was, they were the sort of, that was sort of weekly, these sort of ad ideas, which we called in a way sort of, well, we had, it was just a style that we, would look at what was relevant in the media at the time, and we would just pick up on it. And
I love that. Just being around creative people is so important, especially in changing marketing, in the changing marketing world, for sure. It's really interesting to be around those people within the commercial world. Okay, brilliant. So you were there for a little bit, and then that came to an end just after that. What came next?
Yeah, so in 2011, I left Ryanair. I didn't really want to leave, that's the truth. But it just came to a point where, in order for me to go any further at Ryanair, I would have had to move back to the Dublin office. And I'm based in London. And I had 2 young children at the time, 2 young boys. So the idea of moving back, to Dublin with my family. It just didn't feel right. So,
Yeah.
but I could have, I could easily have, if that were not the case, but I needed to move on in terms of career. I wanted to do something different. I knew that a promotion would involve with another promotion with Ryanair would involve me going back to Dublin. So I knew,
Yeah.
where my options were. So I decided to set up Affinity, also because I'll be honest, but having worked with Michael O'Leary for so long, 13 years, I just couldn't imagine working with another CEO because he was just quite extraordinary, in the sense that he was always there, at the office, always working, always, ready to have a new idea, open to new ideas, creating new ideas himself. Yeah, it was just a very creative environment, to work in. And I think because of that, because of his input, and also, sorry, the one thing I would say is availability. He was there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know many CEOs who are there for any member of the team. It doesn't matter,
Wow.
in fact, sometimes better if you're not, higher up,
Yeah.
because he's so interested in what you have to say. And
Yeah.
I thought about that and I thought, I can't transition from a CEO like that into a CEO that maybe doesn't have that same passion about what they're doing every day. So I decided that I would set up my own business. Also, I'd always wanted to set up my own business and wanted to just take that challenge and that leap and see,
Mm,
what it would be like, working for myself. So yeah, in
absolutely.
2011, I left, and Ryanair were great. They issued a press release about my new business, which I thought was just fantastic. And on the
That's so
back of that
nice.
press release, yeah, on the back of that press release, I got my first, clients, which was equally fantastic. And
Yeah, that's great.
there was a particular business that I worked with, whilst in Ryanair, who actually, did did ask me to come and work with them and help them to develop their business. That was an Italian business, naturally. So I
Yeah.
spent a couple of days in Milan, every 2 weeks, and they were one of my clients. But it was instant. I had, 6 clients, which was just fantastic. And I haven't looked back. I've worked with almost 40 businesses in the last 14 years, all different
Wow.
varieties of business. Some businesses that are, big and corporate, mid-sized businesses, and also, smaller size business, not completely startup, but at that
Yeah.
stage where they have their first funding, and just really helping them to firstly understand, how the airlines think, and to understand how best to win a contract, with airlines, because it's not rocket science, but it is a fine art. So,
Yeah.
that's been very important. But they're people who have products and new ideas. That's one side. And then the other side are the airlines and the airports themselves. So I help the airlines with their ancillaries. So how the products they sell, how they're selling them, partnership ancillaries, but also proprietary ancillaries, what kind of bundles they should put together for the customer, always with the customer in mind. So yeah, so that's the area. It's just a growth area around ancillaries. And interestingly enough, the work with airports is very similar, because airports are always looking at how they can maximize, ancillaries. So that would be like car parking, fast track at airports, lounges, all those areas. So that is essentially, what I do. I've done some work as well with, research companies who are looking into researching certain businesses and trying to understand, will those businesses actually be able to grow, what the growth is for those businesses, generally speaking, because somebody is trying to purchase that business. So
Okay.
that's another area.
Goodness me, it's quite a complex setup of a business, actually, isn't it, Sinead? But it's brilliant. You're covering off all areas for your clients on both provider and making life so much easier for those airlines as well. It's a real complex side of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, that's
It's
exactly right. I
good.
mean, sometimes when you're sometimes inside, you well, I know what it's like inside. It is so
Yeah.
busy. You're
Yeah.
constantly busy. You're yeah, the life. I think I don't think enough people. That's what I would say. Anybody who's looking to get contracts with airlines, I think the first thing they have to understand is how busy they are. So it's a
Yeah.
very, very high pressure business, and it's minute, hour, daily. You're looking at the bookings. You're trying to see what's coming in, trying to see how you can maximize, um, the opportunities, how to see how you can improve the product for the customer. It's constant, and nothing happens overnight as much as you might want to. When you're within
Mm.
the airline to make things happen quickly, they don't. So, and I think people miss sort of underestimate, I think, as well, how IT and e-commerce play such a huge part in any part of the development when it comes to the products and how the products look and feel, because the majority of airlines now are focusing on their website, which is the right way to go. So, yeah, I think it's quite challenging. People are very, very busy. And when they're busy
Mm.
on set projects that they're working on. So you have to be mindful of that. I think that's very much the challenge when you're, trying to show a new product to an airline.
Absolutely. I think the giving a potential supplier a black book as to how to do things and make things easier for the end client is absolutely the main thing to do. My next question I really wanted to focus
Okay,
on
perfect.
is around people. So we are really, we're all in a people business. You especially, well, both of us especially are in the people world, making sure that everybody is very clear on expectations and hand holding through relationship building. Um, have there been some important people within your career that have helped you along? I mean, you've already mentioned Michael, of course. Has there been anyone that's really helped you um, with your crossroads of how things have gone with your career so far?
Well, that is such a difficult question to answer, because mainly
That's
because there have
putting
been
you
so
on it.
many and I wouldn't want to upset
Yeah.
anybody.
Sure.
So it's a difficult one. I mean, trying to think off the top of my head, I would say my brother, just
Yeah.
because he has always been so supportive. And when I was setting up my own business, he helped with the branding. He helped with the name. He said to me, "If you don't choose Affinity, I'm going to choose it for you, or I'm going to use it for my own business." He said, so that pushed me into using it. But he's always been so supportive of every move. So he's been incredible. You
That's
know,
so nice.
at just helping and supporting. And I mean, there's so many people. Um, Warwick Brady, who is the CEO of Swissport, just
Yeah.
fantastic, wonderful, such a positive person, always ready and open to help. But then there's Eddie Wilson, who is now the CEO of Ryanair, who's always been fantastic. There's David O'Brien, who is heading up Air Malta. Yeah, I just honestly, there are just so many people. Then I'm focusing a little bit on Ryanair, but of course, the clients that I've had at Affinity have just been incredible. Seth Cassell from Everymundo, who sold his business to, we worked together for 10 years and he sold his business to Pros. Uh,
Oh, wow.
he's a great guy, has now set up, he's now set up an AI business. So watch the space, called Kaibon.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
I think I know I know he's going to do very well. And yeah, I worked with Mark Brown, who was at EasyJet, who then was with Fusion, which was a business that was part owned by Allianz. And we worked together fantastic
Yeah.
person. He now has his own business selling wedding insurance and cycle insurance
Oh,
and pet
cool.
insurance. So, I mean, honestly, it's such a difficult question. And I'm really sorry, anyone who's listening, that I've left out. Oh,
No.
there's another person I do want to mention. Um, because we work together for in the ancillary department at Ryanair. Aileen worked for me. She's fantastic. She's Aileen McCormack. She's the chief commercial officer at Car Trawler now, but she worked with me on the ancillary side. So yeah, wonderful. Honestly, really, Rachel, do not like that
The
question.
list
Too many names to mention
Sorry.
in a 20
I'm,
a
so,
29-year career at this point.
oh, I know it's so hard.
So sorry
It's
again
one
to
of those
anyone
things
I've
that
left out. I love you all. You are
it is a horrible split question. It's just highlighting how important people are within our world. That's all. It's just, you know, um, we can all feel a bit like an island sometimes, but we really are in a people centric world. So that's great. Have there ever been any? I mean, you're working in dynamic environments all the time, but have there ever been any projects that you've really learned from that perhaps haven't gone perfectly? That perhaps, you know, we can keep that in our minds for the future.
well, of course. I mean, life isn't perfect, but I
Mm,
think any of them, interesting enough, anything that was more challenging, the easy projects, you don't get the same satisfaction out of when you spend
true.
a long time and you spend long hours with teams of people. And at the end of that, you get to the point where the product is live or you've cracked that deal, whatever it is. That's where the real, yeah, I think that's where the real joy is, if that's the right word for it.
Mm,
Yeah, you get a lot of enjoyment out. I get a lot of enjoyment out of those tougher projects. Well, I think what
mm,
I would say about the tougher projects is it's persistency, and that's what I've noticed. It's just you need to just stick with it, stay persistent. And I mean, I know I'm working on a project that I love when I actually wake up first, or maybe that I don't love, or maybe that I find challenging. When I wake up first, and it's the first thing that comes to my head is overnight I think about clearly how I'm going to get over the next obstacle the next day. So I wake up and I think, oh, that's it. That's what I'll do. I get my light bulb moment in the morning. And yeah, I think, yeah, the challenging, I look back and at the time you think the challenging ones are very frustrating and tough.
yeah,
But when you look back, they're the ones that you remember the most, and probably the ones that you're most proud of.
absolutely. I agree. I agree. Nothing that comes easy is normally as satisfying as something that you fixed. That is true. Well, I know we're just doing a really quick chat today, Sinead, but I'm so pleased that we managed to run through a couple of really nice little snippets there. Good people, good projects, knowing what good looks like as well is always good. Um, is there any top tips that you can see in the market at the moment? Affinity obviously is looking at everything commercial ancillary contract based. But any views on this new ancillary revenue, OOSD, new modern retailing, how things are looking moving forward?
I think a lot of airlines have to get the current, their current product up and running and right. I think, and the airlines completely recognize that. They recognize the opportunity, and I think the airlines, who are feeling the challenge of getting because we all know what the numbers are now. So they're looking at some of the top players and wondering, how do I get my ancillary revenue to that sort of profit per passenger, if you like. So I think that's an
Mm,
aspect. So airlines just focusing on getting that right first before they bring in other partnerships or other elements, or to it. I think also I mean, we have no idea where AI is going to take us in terms of, ancillary revenue. It's not clear yet, and it's growing at such a pace. I think, before we know it, we'll be in a situation where that will change. It will change, the look, the feel, how the product is sold, etc., and so forth. So that will be interesting to see how that moves into the future. And yeah, I think really it's very, very important that the ancillary team are able to have the ear of the senior management so that they can get projects over the line, because you know I think there's so many things you can do. There's so many things you should do and shouldn't do. But the reality of it is if you don't try them, you won't know what works. If you just sit there and leave everything the way it is, um, you're not going to know if changing it is going to improve. And I think you have to be prepared to take that step, that leap, courageous. To just someone has to make that call to do something different and to see if it has a positive impact on the customer.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom. Brilliant, Sinead. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. Affinity is such a brilliant business and everybody should be speaking to them. So go and call Sinead if you need some help in the ancillaries. Thank you so much and we'll speak again.
Thank you, Rachel. I've loved chatting to you today.